Hey everyone. Decided to change it up a little bit and have a little bit more intimate setting, so I hope you're liking it. I watched the Trump Kamala debate, and if you want to call it a debate, but have you ever been in that position where what you perceive is not what's reported? Like, I found that I thought the debate wasn't like it was just political posturing on both sides, and the next day it was like Kamala won and Trump lost, and Kamala was the clear winner and da da da. And I was like thinking to myself, like, I don't think she won at all. I think that if anything, the American people were the ones that lost. I mean, there was no clear understanding about what Kamala would do differently on big issues. I talked before on this podcast or on this YouTube channel that Kamala and Trump agree on domestic oil production. Domestic oil production has grown the most under Joe Biden, including the Willow Project, the largest oil production project in the history of the United States, all okayed under the Democrats. And that directly contributes to CO2 emissions. Like directly. I don't want to know how many CO2 emissions those projects will emit, but it's a lot. And Trump would agree with the Willow Project. Yes, Biden might have said no to Keystone, but he said yes to Willow. And what, is Trump going to say no to Willow? Like, of course he's going to say yes to that. And Joe Biden sent $20 billion to Israel. I'm pretty sure Donald Trump would agree with that as well. So I think on big issues, they actually do agree. On major issues, they agree. And I would argue they probably do agree as well on illegal immigration. It's just that Trump and Harris would not want to admit that. Because, one of Biden's legacies, I think, as president, which surprisingly has never been really covered, has been his ability to work with Republicans. And I had a great conversation on this podcast with a professor out of Shippensburg University. And Allison and I talked specifically about how Biden knows like the Republicans very well and knows their perspectives and works with it and is very bipartisan. I think he passed the most bipartisan bills than any other president. And that's not talked about by mainstream media at all. And there's a very specific reason for that. And that's because that doesn't get you clicks and likes, right? Like there's a reason why not covering bipartisan bills is not really sexy because it doesn't get people angry, scared, raged, fearful, etc. It gets people agreeing with each other. But I do think that is actually Biden's legacy, his ability to work with the other side. And, the other part about all of this, and the media hasn't really done a good job of covering this at all, is that Kamala Harris inherited Joe Biden's delegates. So she can't really put forward innovative policy that's her own. She has to run on the Biden playbook because there's no other choice. Joe Biden's delegates are Joe Biden's delegates. They voted for Joe Biden and the Biden plan. So she has to do that. Otherwise, that would cause a lot of conflict. And, I think we also have to talk about that. Like, if a president steps down, should someone inherit the other person's delegates? Or should they run on their own? Because you have to remember, delegates are from across the country. And so you have to make your case across the country. And the fact that Kamala inherited his delegates means that she didn't have to do any of that legwork. She didn't have to pitch her brand to different states and get them to vote on her. She bypassed that whole process. And I don't think the Federalists like Alexander Hamilton would ever be okay with that. Like, I don't think that they would be like, yeah, that's a good idea. Because in the Federalist Papers, they were quite specific about the corruption of the individual or of the system in the event that the delegate system isn't adhered to. And that's why the delegate system was created, which was, if you're going to run for president, you have to make your case to all 50 states and get a majority of people on your side. And that's why you're running for president, to get people on your side. And so it's just odd to me. And so I guess like this whole thing has just made me really skeptical of perception and reality, or skeptical in how things are covered. And I'd love to know what you think. Do you agree that the coverage seemed a bit one-sided, but also not aligned with your perception as well? And I want to leave you on this. And it's something very interesting. I just want to kind of paint this picture for you, but it's like, there's a clear reason why media is what it is. I mean, it's a business. It has to make dollars and cents. But what that does to our psyche when it comes to political issues, we only look at things through a prism that the media tells us to look at it through, whether it's illegal immigration, healthcare, carbon emissions, climate change, whatever it is. It's like they have a prism, and that's how we're viewing that issue through. And when it comes to like debating that idea, it's really a debate within the prism, if that makes sense. It's not a debate on how they've framed the issue, right? So like a perfect example is I find that media sometimes puts like a very humanitarian spin on illegal immigration. For obvious reasons, I think most people would not want an inhumane policy towards other people who are like escaping dire levels of poverty. Like I think most people are pretty reasonable to an extent, but where the media I think goes wrong is it doesn't give a voice to people who have legitimate questions about illegal immigration. I think they kind of dismiss those opinions completely, and they don't want to hear that at all. And so when we don't hear those voices, when we don't hear those dissenting views, we suddenly start dismissing those views as well. And that's not healthy for our discourse or discussion. It's unhealthy, and it leads to a corruption of how we understand issues. And it's not like the media has to have every single different perspective on. I get that, like they can't. But I also understand that they have a vested interest in not getting specific views on as well. And so I'd love to know what you think about that. But more importantly, I'd also like to know what you think about the debate and how you found it was covered. Because again, I just felt like it was one thing that I saw and experienced, and then another thing to see how it was covered. So let me know if you agree in the comment section below. All right, take care, everyone.